Ever wonder how people perceive you? Do they look up to you? Or do they think you are beneath them? Do they admire you? Or just pity you? Do they look at you and see a hero, a role model, or just a tyrant? Well, it all depends on the dignity of your sun. Western astrology often places the sun in the most important position in one's chart. It perceives the sun to be who you are. And in Vedic astrology as well, you see the concept of the sun being the significator of the soul, who that individual really is. However, it is not an indicator of personality. For that, the moon is a far better indicator. It is also not the indicator of how you look, how you feel, etc. It's not your body or your persona. That is your ascendant. So what exactly does the sun represent? The best way to view the sun is, how do you project yourself onto the world? What do you shine out? What do people see when they look at you? This is why the sun is so important. It's not a matter of, well, again, your personality or the way you look. It's not about that. It's about how others see you. What do you do with your life? How do you project yourself onto the world? And what are the results? So, what are the parameters of the sun's dignity? Well, there are two. The first one is the sign it occupies. Is it exalted, debilitated, in its own sign, in an enemy sign, etc.? That parameter does not dictate how strong it is. That's a misconception. What it really does is show you how well do you understand the concept that the sun represents. How well do you understand power? How well do you understand authority? How well do you understand your own personal strength and energy? How well do you understand the concept of dignity? That is why the dignity of the sun is of paramount importance when compared to other planets. It shows you how dignified you are as an individual, basically, because it is how others perceive you, and it is how you interact with the world. Now, let's say you have an exalted sun. Well, an exalted sun is best described as a sun at the height of its power, just rising above the horizon, ready to shine for an entire day. This shows someone who is quite aware of how important the outer appearance is, how important it is to show authority and dignity. But it also shows someone who knows that the authority and dignity should be applied to himself, not to others. That is why the sun is exalted in the natural first house, in Aries, not in Libra. Someone who is debilitated someone who has a debilitated sun, on the other hand, would basically give his authority to others. Let others decide for him. Let others dictate how he feels about himself. That is why it is debilitated there, because the person has no willpower. He doesn't take command over himself. He lets others decide. What about sun in its own house? Well, then the person is well versed in authority. In fact, it is often even better than an exalted sun, because then he is fully comfortable with the intricacies of power, of authority, of public image. But he's also in his own element. He doesn't need to impress someone else. He's already on his throne. He just needs to keep it. So he will be guarded when it comes to personal assaults, but he won't be seeking to impress anyone. He won't need to. How about sun in an enemy sign, for example, in Capricorn, Aquarius, the signs of Saturn? In this case, the sun is restricted. It is too rigid, too cold, too aloof, detached, and also too mundane, too simple. For example, Aquarius is a sign of the masses. If the sun is there, the person feels like just another schmuck. He doesn't feel like anything special. He is just another regular Joe. In Capricorn, he basically feels like a cog in the machine, another brick in the wall. He has no dignity of his own. He's basically no one. How about Libra, the sign of debilitation? In this case, the sun is basically surrendered to the authority of others, as has been mentioned before. In Libra, the sun is basically judged by others. So, if someone else says that you are worthy, great. If they say you are nothing, that's exactly what you will believe. That is why it is debilitated there. It has no personal authority. The king is completely ruled by the mob, by his advisors. He has no power. He is nothing. But what happens if that debilitated sun is placed in the first house, where it is strong, or in the 10th? In that case, it has a lot of actual results to give. However, the results are going to be far from perfect. A good example would be Friedrich Nietzsche. That's exactly the position of his sun. It is debilitated, but in the first house. Well, Nietzsche was about to finish his book, The Will to Power, and he realized, hey, that idea doesn't work. And the book itself was an attempt to explain how people perceive themselves in a more dignified way, as well as what motivates them to achieve. He thought it was all about power. Then he realized, no, it isn't. So he stopped. But then he went crazy. He was the insane guy. So his sister published the book and tarnished his reputation. Now, that's exactly why the debilitated sun is a problem. It's not just about achieving a reputation, it's about the kind of reputation you will achieve. He was later linked to Nazi ideology, even though he was a complete opponent of that ideology. He hated it. But there you go. The complete opposite can be seen with Sigmund Freud, who had an exalted sun, but in the seventh. What happens then? Well, he is still admired today, but for the wrong reasons. Say, when it came to his own personal authority, he had a phobia of alpha males, and he tended to faint whenever he was around an authority figure. Not exactly a good performance, wouldn't you say? He also had quite a few issues with exerting his authority on others. In fact, that's the reason why he and Jung had fallen out, because he basically was a tyrant, trying to rule everyone, but he couldn't. He had no strength behind his outbursts, shall we say. He had the bark, not the bite. The strongest position of the sun is in the 10th house, and no matter what the dignity is, in the 10th house, it's all about being out there in front of others and shining the best you can. If it's in a good dignity, the sun can produce an excellent career. If it's in a bad dignity, that career will be tarnished by some scandal or something similar. But the career the sun promises will still be there, because again, it is the primary duty of the sun to shine in the middle of the sky and light everything and to show itself to others. So whatever the dignity, the sun will fulfill its natural role. It will fulfill the duty of shining its light, no matter how effective that light is. The complete opposite happens if the sun is in the 4th house. In this case, a person can be a king in his own home, but outside he is invisible. Basically, a sun in the 4th house is the antithesis of what it is supposed to do. It can be great when it comes to the family life, it can be great for comfort, for having a nice home. But when it comes to name and fame, it is not what it will achieve. It simply cannot produce the results. That is why it is considered to be the weakest position for the sun, because it cannot shine on you from the other side of the globe. You have the earth in the way. Sometimes the strength and dignity of the sun can work to cancel each other out. For example, if you have a debilitated sun in the 10th, it's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it produces some of the best politicians one can imagine. It produces great public figures, although they are, well, quite corrupt in many cases, but they are great in terms of achieving the high position and keeping it. When it comes to an exalted sun in a fourth, one can expect a magnificent home, a great family. Sure, it won't produce the best career, but sometimes it doesn't have to. Sometimes it's enough to have a great family. Now let's get to the interesting part. How does the dignity of the sun affect someone's health? In fact, it is even more important than the condition of the ascendant. Why? Because, sure, if the ascendant lord is well placed and in good dignity, someone will have quite a healthy body. But if his sun is both debilitated and in a fourth house, well, that person is not going to have the strength in his body to achieve much. The sun is in fact the greatest indicator of health because it's our motive force, the energy we have to move, the energy we have to achieve something, the energy we have to grab the food and eat it and digest it. And it's also the energy we have to combat diseases. Without all of these, we are far too vulnerable to overcome the obstacles we face. So the sun is the most important part in our health. In fact, medically speaking, it also represents the heart, without which we cannot even be alive. Now, if someone has a weak heart, he cannot function properly. He has no strength. That is why it is vital to examine the sun whenever you examine a person's chart. It is the greatest indicator of how healthy he is. In addition, the sun is also the indicator of the stomach, of our ability to process the food we eat. If the sun is too weak, we are malnourished. We don't absorb the minerals we need to function properly. So, as you can see, the sun is the most important planet when it comes to health, period. Now, here I should mention that even if the sun is debilitated, it is not an indicator of health problems in and of itself. In fact, you should look at its position in terms of houses, not in terms of signs, to determine how well it functions. You need to look at its strength, not at its dignity. That will tell you far more than simply showing, oh, you might have food allergies if it's debilitated. Oh, you might have indigestion. That doesn't matter. What matters is whether the food that does suit you will get digested in the first place. I hope you found this video useful. Please like and subscribe, and if you wish to learn more about medical astrology and astrology in general, please check out my website. You will find the link below. Thank you.